My name is Juanita Wesley Jarrett. My husband is Josiah Maximilian Bankley Jarrett, number 1. And I am the daughter of Julia Benson Wesley, who was the daughter of MAUDE Braithwaite Eastman. And Maude's mother was Julia Eastman, and her father was Victor Braithwaite. And Julia's father was Thomas Henry Eastman. Julia's mother was Rebecca Ann Stewart. So that's the generation that came on the Cora to Liberia from Barbados. Thomas Henry Eastman and Rebecca Stewart Eastman. It's recorded that they had 4 children, but 2 were on the ship Cora with them. It looks like the middle child must have died, so they came with 2, and my great-grandmother Julia was born in Crusoeville when they arrived. So that's as far as our linkage goes, starting with Thomas Henry Eastman and his wife Rebecca Ann Stewart Eastman. So that's about 4 generations. I knew my great-grandmother Julia Eastman because she lived with her daughter Maud, my grandmother. And then when my mother had to work, because my mother was a widow who brought up 3 children, so my great-grandmother lived with us to help my mother look after us, my great-grandmother Julia Eastman. And I remember, because I used to like to walk about, we lived on Mount Point, I used to like to walk about. And she still had this accent, kind of like West Indian accent. She couldn't say Juanita. She used to call me Vinita. So when instead of being home and doing what I'm supposed to do, I would go out in the neighborhood and visit my friends in the neighborhood. When I come back, she would say, Vinita, I can tell your mama. All day you're going to your friends. I can tell your mama, Vinita. I always remember we used to call her grandma. Grandma used to always talk with this strange accent that to us was unusual, you know. And she used to try to chastise me, and I would just look at her. Next day, I probably do the same thing. Vinita, she couldn't say Juanita. Vinita, I can tell your mama. All day you're going to walk about, I can tell your mama. But she was a sweet old soul. That was my mother's grandmother, my great-grandmother. My grandmother, Maud Eastman, who was Maud Braithwaite, Julia's daughter, she lived in Harrisburg. She lived in Harrisburg because when she and my paternal grandfather, Joseph Benson divorced, my grandmother married Joseph WRIGHT anyway in Harrisburg. They live in Harrisburg. So, in fact, in those days, everybody brought up a child. During the holidays, like at that time, school ended in December and we went on vacation. My mother would pack us up and take us to Harrisburg, where we would be with my grandmother, Maud Braithwaite, used to be Benson and was now WRIGHT, and also her mother, the same Julia Eastman. So we all pack up and go to Harrisburg and spend the whole vacation because mommy was working in Monrovia. And then Harrisburg was also another story. I have a lot of memories about living in Harrisburg also. But we pack up and be with the 2 grandmothers who were blessed, the grandmother and the great-grandmother back in Harrisburg, who helped to bring us up. They would probably get a friend's vehicle to take us up to Harrisburg, but we also traveled by the boat. We'll go down to the water side. It was the landing stage, and there were 2 men who owned boats. One was Mr. Bude and one was Mr. Cooper. They used to call it Bude boat and Cooper boat. I don't know, you must have heard these stories before. Yeah, so we used to get to the landing stage, water side, and get into the boat. and the boat would take us up and embark at White Plains. We would get off at White Plains and then walk to Harrisburg. But when we got to White Plains, there was the Riggs family. We would spend maybe 1 or 2 hours with them to freshen up before we continue our walk on to Harrisburg. So this is normally how we went. When there was no vehicles to take us, we would take the boat going and coming. And coming, if we were to take the boat coming back to Monrovia, we would get up early in the morning, because I think the boat must have left like 9. We would get up like 4 or 5 in the morning and walk from Harrisburg to White Plains to get that boat. And my grandmother used to pack, she would cook our rice, and there were no Betty Crocker containers. They used to keep Quaker Oats tins, clean the Quaker Oats tin, and cook our rice soon in the morning, rice with butter or whatever, and put it in those tins. And that's what we have when we on the boat. Then we'll sit and eat until we finally reach Monrovia. So I have fond memories of those stories. We call her Grand Maud, and she had a sister, Ellen Braithwaite, who later was Ellen Sandy Manning. She was mayor of the city of Monrovia for many years. That was my grandmother's younger sister.
So cousin Ellie was your grandmother's sister?
Correct. They were the two.
Wow.
Maud Braithwaite, Ellen Braithwaite. And then in between, my grandmother Maud had a brother named Napoleon Braithwaite. So those are the 3 prophets I remember: my grandmother Maud, her sister Ellen Braithwaite, and then their brother Napoleon Braithwaite. Yeah. Napoleon lived, I think he was like a farmer. He didn't live in Monrovia. He lived in Bond County, I believe. So we didn't see him so often. But he would come down, spend the day, and go back. Yeah, he didn't live in Monrovia. He was doing farming or whatever work he was doing was in Bond County. My mother, Julia, her father was Joseph Benson. Okay, so she was the first of about so many children. Maud Braithwaite, my mother's grandmother, when Maud and Joseph Benson divorced, Maud married again to Joseph Wright. And I have 2 aunts, Ellen Wright, Shirley Wright, Maud's daughters. And then my mother's father, Joseph Benson, he married again. And he had other children also: Alliette Benson Jones, Enid Benson, and Edward Benson, John Benson. They are most, and he had other children as well, including those that I have just told you about. So on the mother's side, there were several aunts and uncles, and on my mother's father's side, there were several aunts and uncles also. My mother was the eldest of all the siblings. She was the eldest. So Alliette and Enid were her younger siblings. And also the last aunt, my Benson grandfather's last daughter was Nellie Benson. She went to the convent school. She's now Nellie Benson City Fall. And then when Joseph Benson, my grandfather, when he married and Alliette's mother, she had 2 daughters, Mag Johnson, who is Liz's mother, and then the other one was Adeline Johnson. Do you know Adelaide? That was Adelaide's grandmother. She later married a Cole. But those were my mother's half sisters. Her name was Mae Benson McLean. She said there's no half and no whole. In the family, she said everybody is one. So you will never say my half sister, my half brother. You are my sister, my brother. Whether you are my step mother or my step sister, you are not step, you are my mother, my father, so that's how we just all live together as one. This is my sister. This you won't say by pa, by mom. This is my sister. This is my brother. That's how my great aunt Mae Benson McLean brought us up. You have to be interested. Sometimes people hear these things, but then there's no interest. If you are interested in history and in family heritage, then you will be, you know, you find more and more interest in listening to people's origin, people's connection. Some people don't do bad, but I have always been curious. I love history. I love the genesis of things. I ask questions. So I was always interested. That's how come my mother and my grand would tell me all these things. I would ask them, you know. Yeah, cousin SHANNON was SHANNON Holder, but she was married to Sammy David Carter II. And as you know, her sons are Sammy David Carter Jr. and then Maxwell Carter, because you said you spoke to them. How I was married to Maxwell. Yes. And I remember cousin SHANNON, I only knew her when she came back from America. She came from the States as a fashion designer, and she brought all the latest fashion and everything with her. And actually, she was living at my great aunt's home, Ellen Sandy Manning, up on Benson Street. Ellen Braithwaite Sandy Manning. And I remember that mommy took us to cousin SHANNON because she wanted her to make us our dresses for the 26th party. And cousin SHANNON brought the latest fashion. She sold for me and my sister Izina can dresses. That was the fashion in those days, can. And dressed with like a wide skirt and a hoop. And when you walk, it will sway. The can, it will sway. I never forget that cousin SHANNON made these special dresses for us. For us, it was a big deal. Our cousin had come from America. She's bringing all the latest fashion, and she made these can dresses. And in those days, we went to the children's afternoon 26th celebration. I think it was like 2 to 6. And then our favorite style was having your hair pressed. We used to say, curls all around and bangs in front. Curls all around and bangs in front. Later on, instead of curls, we started putting like a ponytail with the bangs in front. So that was the biggest style, easiest style. When they press your hair, to give you curls at the back and the bangs, big bangs in the front. So there were we with our can. And not forgetting that by the time you dance a little, maybe the curls start dropping down because of the heat, but you didn't pay that any mind. All you know, you were dressed up for the 26th children's party. Yeah, definitely. They didn't have as much freedom as maybe our generation. Yes. And well, the parents are very strict on them. If they had a date, they would have a chaperone. And of course, they had to be home by the second time. You know, it was 6 o'clock. And later on in my generation, it was 6 o'clock. You had to be home until you got older. And they had a dance parties. In fact, a lot of them met their husbands to be at a dance party. And normally it was friends. It was people they already knew. It was kind of families they already knew, because they were more sure of whom they were marrying because they knew their family and whatnot. Yes. So they had social events out of town, going to Cruiserville, and from Monrovia to Cruiserville, Monrovia, well, Harrisburg, there wasn't so much life, but Cruiserville, Monrovia. Yeah. Okay, let me start with my mother. Okay. My grandfather, Joseph Benson, was a lawyer. He lived in Edina, but he used to come to Monrovia often to represent his clients and go back to Edina. And his children were all born in Edina. So my mother, Julia, being the first child, grew up in Edina, but at a certain age, he sent her down to Monrovia to live with her aunt, Mae Benson, married to McLean. So my mother was fostered in a sense by her father's sister, Mae McLean. So she grew up more in Monrovia than some of her other siblings who grew up in Bassa until they were much older. My mother, in fact, she was one of the first group of girls that entered the St. Teresa's convent. She was among the first group of girls that entered St. Teresa's convent. When my mother graduated from convent, she went to teach. There was a Lutheran training institute. It was then Lutheran school. That was in Harrisburg. She taught in Harrisburg for a little while, and then she came back to Monrovia and started working at the then State Department. She was a stenographer at the State Department. And then later on, she joined the Liberian Foreign Service. And I remember her working with Secretary Dudley and Gabriel Dennis, and Secretary Dudley were the two I remember that she worked with. So when she had the opportunity, she was able to get a scholarship to further her studies. So she came to Massachusetts to complete her studies in as an administrator. And when she came back to Monrovia, she was back at the Foreign Ministry, and they offered her a position to go into the Foreign Service. They had to do exams in those days. And those days, you work your way up. They didn't just pull people from anywhere and put them in the diplomatic service. You had to do your exams. You had to make sure you had the right training, and you work your way up. So my mother started as a vice consul at the Liberian consulate in England. That's where she was for several years. And later on, they transferred her from the consulate to the embassy and in England, where she was the first secretary at the Liberian embassy. And after that, they sent her on to Holland. No, Holland was the last post. From England, they sent her on to Paris, where she was working also as a first secretary. And then later on, she went to Holland as minister counselor to represent Liberia in Holland. But for many years, she was in England, and she represented Liberia at so many missions and whatnot for those many years that she was in England. They didn't show that much appreciation to women as we're doing now. People now, we are just kind of like empowering women in a sense and giving them the accolades. But in those days, maybe they did, I didn't realize, but they could have done more. But thank God now we're doing much more to give women the laurels when we see that they've done so well. Yes. But like I said, she was a widow. And my mother, when she was at the St. Teresa's convent, like a senior, she was friends of two young ladies, Emma Shannon, who was later Emma Shannon Walser, and cousin Emma and her sister. They were both my mother's friends. And then they had their cousin, who was Isaac Wesley, coming to visit them. So when Isaac Wesley came to visit LISCHEN and Emma, his cousins, he saw Julia Benson and fell in love with her. So it was coming to the convent to meet his sisters, his cousins, Emma and LISCHEN. That's how come he met my mother, Julia. Now, my father was from Upper Capamas. So when he married my mother, he took her down to Capamas. So we have a lot of Capamas connection. My Grable family, the Westleys from Capamas. So unfortunately, after about 5 years of marriage, my father had an illness, they say pneumonia, and he passed away. So after my father died, that was me, my sister, and my brother. So mommy returned to Monrovia and then started her work at what I told you before, that was after my father had died, and she started working at the foreign ministry and so on. She used to have two jobs. I remember she used to have two jobs. She would work at the foreign ministry, and then in the afternoon, she would work with some construction company, all of that to make ends meet. I don't know how she did it, but she did. Yes. She finally retired in 1980. So that's how come we were able to Mommy was able to educate, give us the best education she could, because we traveled with her everywhere. But when we were in London, because she had to work, she put us on boarding schools. We went to convent schools. My brother went to a Catholic school also, because she couldn't look after us all day and work, so she put us on boarding school. For us in those days, boarding schools, the schools that we went to were like spoon-fed. You know, the nuns, we didn't feel any prejudice. They were so good to us that they spoiled us. But we hated going to school anyway because of all the rules and regulations. We hated going to board. But that's how come my mother was able to educate us, because of her position in the foreign service and being sent abroad to represent her country. People would just probably recognize the men, but the women were in the background. Like you said, doing a little petty market, selling the bread, making their quilts and things like that. And the men were in the forefront. Yes. So my mother was a professional diplomat, I would say. And then my father, he was a jack of all trades. He was a lawyer, he was a teacher, he was supervisor of schools in education. Yes. And the people of Capanos gave me a lot of fond memories about my own father, Isaac Wesley. Yeah, so I have the Barbadian connection, and I have the Gribble, Capanos, Maryland, Liberia connection. My school was Stella Maris Convent. It was in the southwest of England, right by the seashore in Devon, North Devon, southwest England. Yes. Let me start with Mommy. She was at this garden party. In fact, when Queen Elizabeth passed away a few months ago, I was texting everyone, my auntie Lizzie is gone, Auntie Lizzie is gone, because Mommy was in England for a long time, and at one of the garden parties, when she greeted the Queen asked her how long she had been in England, and Mommy told her how long. She said, "Whoa, you're one of us now. You're one of us." So I also went with my mom and my husband to a garden party at Buckingham Palace also. Those were the days, as I say, those were the days how Liberia was Liberia. Let me put it that way. Yeah, and in Holland, she also met Queen Juliana, because they would have special occasions to invite diplomats, you know. So she met Juliana. She was decorated by the Queen of England. She was decorated by the Dutch government also. Ambassador Dudley Lawrence, my mother worked with him. Dudley Lawrence, that's Joe Lawrence's daddy. And Blanche, Joe's mother, was my mother's cousin already. So, you know, by coincidence, Mommy worked with Dudley. So we were in London at the same time, but they moved on somewhere else and so on. Yeah, so I was ambassador. And then her first diplomatic post was, as I said, at the consulate of Liberia in London. And she worked with G. Plummer Sherman. He was an erudite professor from Grand Bassa. G. Plummer. He had daughters, Louisa, they used to sing. And she also worked with Ambassador Brewer, George Brewer. Yeah. In Holland, she worked with Ambassador George Wallace. Wallace, W-A-L-L-A-C-E. He's still in Monrovia, and I think right now he's like he's the doyen of all the foreign service people at the foreign ministry. I think he's more like an advisor to them now, Ambassador George Wallace. My mother worked with him also in Holland. In France, she worked with Ambassador James Freeman also. So those are some of the ambassadors that she worked with. She had lived abroad so long that she wanted to be in Liberia with her family. Yeah, so she moved to Liberia. But when the war came in 1990, she said, had I known, I would have asked for asylum and stayed abroad. Because when the war came, 10 years after she retired in 1990, she said, I wish I had known I would have stayed abroad and not going through all this war in 1990. But when she came in 80, when she was retired, she said she wants to be home with her family, and her children were all home because she had been abroad for so long. Yeah. During the war, yes, she was with us in and out of America. And then later on, when she got a bit older, she said she wanted to go back home. So we realized she was tired. She wanted to go home because she probably didn't want to die in this country, and we had to take her home. So she went home, and after some years, she got ill, and then she passed away. Julia Benson Wesley.
How old was she when she passed away?
About 92. While in England, a lot of Liberians who had their children abroad in England would ask my mother to help to guide their children, you know. They would come and spend vacation with us or come and spend the weekend or the day. Most people thought she was a student advisor, but she wasn't. She was the diplomatic representative, but because she wanted to help people and these parents asked her to help their children, so she was close to many of the children, giving them lodging and whatnot. So people thought she was a student advisor, but she wasn't. There was someone else who was the student advisor. Yeah. Ford and Robert. Yeah, Hillary, they were all there at that time also. Yeah. She was steadfast, conscientious, very hardworking, honest, friendly, liked to help people, humanitarian. Yes. Because sometimes I wonder, when people came to stay with us, we all bung out together, you know, and we loved it. Some people would say, oh, I don't have room for you, blah, blah. But we just love being together on the mattress, on the floor. We just love being together. And I realized from her, whatever she made, she shared it. Whatever we had, we ate together, we shared. Some people would say, oh, I don't have enough to share. Don't come, don't send your children. But Mommy was very kind and always helpful. Yes. And she was a disciplinarian, but with love. You know, Mommy was strict, especially I'm the eldest, and the way she brought me up, you better look after your brothers and sisters. There's not much difference between us, but if anything happened to them, I was to be blamed. So she brought me up that way. So today when they tell me, look at you, I say, yes, my mother made me look after you all night, you all giving me chick. People didn't like that because just as she tried to discipline us, she tried to discipline whoever came under her wings. Some people didn't like it, but she felt, I can see you going astray and not correct you, you know, that's not who I am. But she was a disciplinarian. And I thank her for that. She was a disciplinarian, but she was understanding, like Mommy would let us go to parties. And as teenagers, we had parties home. So once I asked her, I said, but Mommy, why you allow us to have parties in our house? She said, you know what? The party was in my house. I could keep eye on you. It's better for you to go out to the party. That's why the party came to you. You get it? Well, under her roof, dancing and having fun. Instead of going out there, she knew, she said, that's why I allowed you all to have parties right in the home, so you didn't have to go out. I knew where you were under my roof. Sometimes there was something we really needed. Mommy would say, you're not one, you're not two, you're three, my children, you're three. I always remember that, you know. So we can't get it now, you're not one. And but one thing, she taught us to study, to learn, okay? But spending money, we spent. Mommy didn't really teach us what to budget. So one day when I got married, and later on I said, but Mommy, wait now, you taught us all these things. Why you never taught us budgeting? She said, you know what? I budgeted for you. I budgeted. I didn't want you all to worry about anything. So in other words, if we wanted to buy shoes for, let's say, 10 pounds or 5 pounds, she already had a budget and would give us X amount, and we bought it for that price. So she budgeted. But I didn't realize that all I know what we needed, she gave us. But she had budgeted ahead, so I didn't have to worry about budgeting. Because after I got married, before I learned how to budget. Yeah, so I said, Mommy, why you didn't teach me about budgeting? She said, because I budgeted. I didn't want you to worry. I just want you to study. So I budgeted for you. Yeah. So many happy men. Mommy was so jovial. You know, everywhere she went, she had a grin on her face, always smiling. But don't cross her path. Don't make her mad. She would just be the opposite, you know. She was a Scorpio. So I said, Mommy, don't bring your Scorpio now. Scorpio, they stink. they would be okay, but don't touch them, they will sting. And that was mommy. If you did something to her, she will let you know and it will sting. You understand? Yeah. But she was a very friendly, warm person, always helping others. Yes. I went to St. Teresa's School. In fact, first of all, I started with, they had a kindergarten. I started from there, the government kindergarten. And then they had when the Assembly of God Mission School opened, my mother sent me to AGM on the corner. I think it's still there at the corner of Buchanan and Carey Street. Went to AGM. And then after that, I went to the convent. And I remember we used to play our ring. We used to play Bent Down to the Bush, all those songs, yeah. Bent Down to the Bush. And we used to play the hand games, everything. Yeah. And I remember one song, Little Sally Walker. Little Sally Walker sitting in the sunshine, laughing and crying for her young man. Rise, shall Sally, rise, wipe your weeping eyes, fly to the east, or Sally, fly to the west, Sally, fly to the very one that you love the best. Then you would grab somebody, they would come in the ring and it would be Sally. So that's how it went around. I remember playing that at convent, Little Sally Walker. I don't know where that song came from. It must have been a West Indian song, you know, Little Sally Walker. I don't know where it came from. I was at St. Teresa's School from the 4th to the 8th grade. I graduated the 8th grade in convent. Then I went to high school. Then I went to secondary school in England. I had several friends. Marjorie Pia Cooper, Clara Castle, Marjorie, Clara, Frances Gibson, we used to call her Miss Gibb, and Facia Beslow, and Elaine Thomas. They were some of my classmates, and so many others, you know. Yeah, I kept in touch with most of them until later we all got older or we got sick or whatnot. We used to communicate for a long time. The nuns taught us, and we had a teacher, Dorothy Cole. She taught us, Teacher Cole, Dorothy Cole. Yes. When we in England, you do your general certificate of education, you do your ordinary levels, you do your advanced level, and then you go to university. So at Stella Maris Convent, I did my ordinary level, I did my advanced level, and I went to the University of Leeds, north of England, and that's where I got my law degree. But when I entered my first year university, that's when I met my husband. He was studying in Germany. And when we started going out dating, he wanted to marry right away. I wanted to marry right away. And this is Julia Wesley. Not by side, Juanita, you gotta get your degree first. I was ready to put a degree aside and go husband, go with man. She said, you crazy? You know, when you're young, you're foolish, you know. She said, no, you gotta make sure you get that degree first. So, of course, my husband was very patient because he had graduated. He's several years my senior. He had graduated. He was working already as a physician. So we dated, and I would go to Germany to visit him. He would come to England until 3.5 years. Got my degree. I got my degree in July. We married in August. One reason I wanted to get out of my mom's house and be on my own. And I met a good man. I met a good man whom I could trust. Very trustworthy. My husband is Josiah Maximilian Juanita Jarrett. His family is of Sierra Leone origin from Freetown, but his father came to Liberia, to Timor, to another relative, and his father was a businessman and became naturalized Liberian, and he became a superintendent in those days in Timor district, but now it's part of River Cess. That's what my husband's family was from, River Cess. Sierra Leone origin, for business people from River Cess. His father was called Theophilus Jarrett from River Cess, Timbo, Grand Bassa County. That's my husband's side of the family. So he was doing medicine in Germany, and I was in England when we got married. We have both stayed away so long, and Liberia was sweet. We didn't want, we were tired of being abroad. We wanted to come home. So right away, we got married in August, and then by the end of the year, December, we moved to Liberia to start our lives. Yes, to start our lives. Well, we were happy to be home in those days. We had electricity every day. So we had air conditioning, you know. You pay your bill, you got your light and water. And he worked at the government hospital because he was on a government scholarship. So he came to work for the government. But then we were in Monrovia for about maybe a year when the bunk mining company heard about him, that he was trained in Germany. So they invited him to go and work in bunk mine as the medical director. So we're about a year or two in Monrovia, then we moved to bunk mine. And that's where we were for so many years. That's where my children, except for Max, who was born in Monrovia, that's where my other two children were born. And that's where the children grew up in bunk mine, Bunk County, at the bunk mining company hospital. In fact, to be frank, I don't know, but most people, when they live in Europe for a long time, they don't want to live in America. My first visit to America was like in the 80s after the coup, because I had no desire. My friends in America would meet them in Monrovia when we went for vacation. I really had no desire to live in America. It's not because of the war that we were forced to leave home and come here, you know, because by that time we had a lot of relatives here rather than going to Europe or to England itself. Yeah. So, and we never really wanted to leave our country. Home is home. And we were, as professionals, he was a professional, I was a professional. God provided for us. We were living comfortably. We didn't want to leave to come abroad to live anymore. We wanted to be right in Liberia. Yes. And so we were living in bunk mine between Liberia and Germany because they sent him to specialize in other things. And we lived in Germany about another 2 years before we came back, and he took over the hospital at bunk mine as the medical director. During those years, I was bringing up having my babies, bringing them up. So I didn't practice law because someone had to be home to manage the home. In those days, as a medical director, he entertained. Someone had to be home. And so what I did part-time work with an insurance company as a representative in bunk mine. Before that, I taught English to German-speaking children at the bunk town school. You know, I would do part-time work just to be busy also, and being home when my children were home. But then when my husband retired and we finally moved back to Monrovia, that's when I got more into my legal profession. And I joined the bar as a counselor of law. I worked with several law firms. And then my main thing I like to be happy to tell you about is I was much involved with women's empowerment. I was a founding member of the Association of Female Lawyers of Liberia. We ensured that the inheritance bill, which made inheritance rights equal for both women born under statutory law and the tribal law, because before then, when you were married under tribal law, you couldn't inherit property. But the inheritance bill, which was put into law to give them that equal rights, we were able to put that through, etc. And also, I'm a founding member of the Mano River Women Peace Network. During the war years, along with Mrs. Mary Brownell and Mrs. Ophelia Setuma and Amelia Ward, Ruth Caesar, were able to come together and help to bring peace, to broker peace among the warlords. We actually met some of the warlords in Monrovia to talk to them that we wanted peace, because if there's no peace, we cannot move forward. So the Mano River Women Peace Network that comprised of women from Guinea, Liberia, and Sierra Leone, and now Cote d'Ivoire has joined that group also to always try to make sure that peace is maintained, you know. So we had workshops, we had training, and so far the process is still ongoing because there's always something, there always seems to be some problem that has to be solved. So they're looking to these women to continue to help them do so. Yeah, so I was happy that while representing clients at court or whatever, I had time also to engage myself with peace building in Liberia, because if you don't have peace, you won't be able to go to court. If you don't have peace, you won't be able to live to do anything else. So I focus a lot of attention on peace brokering, you know, in Liberia, along with some of the other women. While we're at Bond Mine, I did a little practice, and I remember there was this German man. I've forgotten what he had done, but they called him before the tribal court. So the company asked me to go and represent him. So when I went to the court, I was telling the tribal officer, the magistrate, I said, but you know what? With all due respect to you, you have no jurisdiction over this particular man. If anything, it should be with the magistrate court or another court, but not your court. The man said he will report me to my husband. He said he will report me to my husband because I made his shame in front of all the people. Do you know he went to my husband and said, I came to report your wife because she came to my court, she made me shame in front of all the people that I wasn't doing the right thing. He reported me, the lawyer, to my husband to show you how narrow-minded they were, what they were thinking. I said, oh my goodness, there we go again. And so I will report you to your husband. You're supposed to be who your husband, not coming to my court. I never forget that. Yes. Emma Shannon Walser. And she got her law degree from the Louis Arthur Grant School of Law. Yes. And I can't think her last post what it was, but I remember that she was one of the women. She and Mrs. C. Chesson, they were some of the women in those days who really stood out, you know, having graduated from the Louis Arthur Grant School of Law, and had an impact on the Liberian society and on the law. Emma Shannon Walser and C. Chesson. Since my husband and I were blessed to have had some education out of Liberia, our dream was to send our first child to England, Maximilian. So when he was about 9, we sent him to boarding school in England. And the reason he went at 9, so that he could adapt. He could adapt easily. If you're older and you go to England, you don't fit into the system. Now it's a little different. But in those days, if you went too late, you wouldn't fit. So we had to send him earlier. That's why we sent him at 9. So, and luckily for us, my mom was still in the foreign service. So he would spend his Easter and Christmas breaks with her, and then summer he would come home to us. But then the other 2 children, things got better. When we sent Max, the Bongtown school only stopped to 8th grade. But by the time my other 2 children were older, it went on to 12th grade. So things had changed, things got better. So that our other 2 children didn't come to college abroad until they had finished high school in Liberia. Yes. I want to talk about, maybe you've heard this before. If you go out and they say come home by 6, they say you don't want them to beat you or quarrel you, put a rock under your tongue. You heard about that? I don't know where that superstition came from, but you coming home a little after 6, you take a rock, small rock, put it on your tongue. Then when you get home, they will not quarrel you or punish you or something. Yeah, so those are some of the stories, because as I said, I love being with people. I was always out and run home, out making friends, run home, you know. So, and growing up in Monrovia, we used to have flag day drilling. We used to practice. We go to when we go to school, and we go on the field to practice. Convent girls, St. Patrick's boys, other schools, CWA, whatnot. We practiced and we walk our friends home. Sometimes they walk you home. And we had a thing, if you visited your friend, You walking halfway, and then they will walk you halfway. Then when you want to say bye, you say put there and run. You know, put there, right? Yeah, so you say put that, and you make sure they don't catch you. Put that, and you run home. I walk you home. It was like a crazy thing. You walking halfway, they walk you back halfway, and you finally, depart and whatnot. And we had a lot of dancing parties in those days. They were really innocent dancing parties, going to dances and whatnot. And growing up as a young girl, teenager, if a young man saw you and liked you, he will write to you. Will you be my girlfriend? And you will write to him whether you accept him or not. And then they will send you sentimental songs, and you will send them sentimental songs. I remember all of that. Even now, I remember, I said, Lord, we were just teenagers, but we did all these things, They will write to you. And then when you go to when you go out to a dance, sometimes the boys sitting on one side, they will come, may I have this dance? And you will say yes or no. They will ask me, may I have this dance? But now they don't dance. The younger, I don't think that these days children don't dance. They're always on their phones, They don't dance. I hear they don't dance. I like a sour leaf. I like basa jamba. Yes, cassava leaf is my favorite. I could eat it 2-3 times a day or a week. Yes. Mommy loves a little soup and a little fufu. She loves soup. In fact, she would drink soup as not a main meal. She would drink her soup and then she would do her entree, her main meal, but she would always like to start with some soup. She loves soup. Even if it's just plain soup with little vegetables or something in there, she loves her soup. I remember growing up, when we had guests come to the home, sometimes we'd be chatting. They would, when they hear me talk, they say, Julia, this girl should do law. She can talk. It's because I didn't think about what I wanted to do, but I just like talking, expressing myself. They said, you should encourage this girl to do law, Julia. But for me, I hadn't made up my mind. So back to the question, people who inspire me were those that our friends, our relatives, who saw what I could offer, who saw my potential and encouraged me. And my mother, number one, and then friends and relatives who saw the potential in me and gave me encouragement. Yes. So teaching, why? Because you're never out of school. You teach in school, you come home, you have to do lesson plans. So I didn't want to teach, but I always wanted something to help people. If I hadn't done law, I would have done social studies, sociology. I always wanted to do something for people, to help people. Yeah, so those that inspired me were relatives, friends who encouraged me when they saw what I could do. Yes. My parents' greatest contribution to the Liberian society was empowering young people, teaching young people, training young people, and being involved in the development of young people, which they did. My father was a supervisor of schools. My mother was a teacher, and later she was a diplomat, and setting an example for others, young people to follow. So on the whole, that was their contribution to society, and I'm sure they were emulated by many who came after them. I think my parents and grandparents are going to be remembered for the lessons, the examples they gave, by working hard, by being loving, by being kind. Those are the legacies that they left. And those are some of the legacies that we ourselves are trying to follow. And we hope our children are also emulating what we are doing by walking in the footsteps of those gone before us. So showing kindness, showing love, and helping each other, and so on. Yeah, being hardworking to being honest. Yes. All they have to be, first of all, the future generation, they have to be interested in their forebears. They have to be interested in what has gone before. Many times you sit down, you want to tell them, they say, oh, that old-fashioned thing, that's old time, I don't have interest. But they have to be interested to know that people who came before them, what they did, who they were, so that they can also tell their generations what all happened. So I'm hoping that our examples will be good for them to follow, so that they can know more about their family history, their heritage, because it's so interesting and it's so necessary, so that what our parents did, our grandparents did, doesn't go in vain, that they are not forgotten. So our children and even now I'm telling my grandchildren a lot, we sit down, we talk old stories, and then we let them know what happened, and let them be interested. We put in some fun, and we put in some other sad memories, fun, happy memories. We let them know about it. Yes. I think, when you're young, most people when they're young, they don't care, but when people get older, that's when they realize, oh, they can connect better when they get older and they ask more questions. So I think now, especially as they grow older, like my grandchildren, as they grow older, they will want to know more about, family heritage, so they can have that to hand down to their own children. Yes. My father was indigenous. He was H2 Wesley. He was the first indigenous vice president of Liberia, H2 Wesley. That's my father's father. So he was a Gribble man from Fishtown. He was the first indigenous vice president of Liberia, H2 Wesley. That was my father's father, Gribble man. On my father's side, my father's mother was a Watkins. Have you heard about the Watkins? Do you know Audrey Watkins? That's my father's family on his mother's side, Watkins. So that was the American Watkins mix. I got Barbadian blood, I got Gribble blood, I got American blood. And the BENSON, they actually came from the Congo. There was a real family from the Congo, from the Belgian Congo. Fenaripo, they came from there. The real Congo people, Congo. You heard about the Congo family, most of them settled in Pinsville. Like Mr. Howard, NGO, they came down from Belgian Congo through Fernando Po. So the Bensons were Congo people that were settled in Grand Bassa. The Congos, you had the Americos, then you have our indigenous families in Haiti. And cousin Dudley was in Jamaica. Dudley Lawrence, he was in Jamaica. His father was a doctor also.